Hello, viewers. We are back again. So, this is the Stay Can Show. For those joining us for the first time, Stay Can stands for Standing Together Against Child Abuse and Neglect.
Mhm.
Our job here is to work together, to educate, to learn, and our overall aim is to promote the well being of children. We have been talking about child abuse over the past, few weeks, and we will be continuing with the subject. Last 2 weeks we talked about physical abuse, and today, this evening, here in the UK, we're going to talk about emotional abuse. So we will start off with an introduction, as we normally do. So
Mhm.
Ejiro, could you please tell the viewers who you are?
Yeah, so my name is Adrian, and I'm a qualified social worker. I've been a social worker for 15 years, working with
Mm,
children and family in children and family settings. So this is my field and my expertise. So tonight, we welcome you and thank you for having us to support our community, as workers
mm.
and as volunteers.
Yeah, as volunteers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, thank you. Yeah, and then my name is also Elsie Owusikumi. I'm also a social worker, and we will be doing this. I'll be doing this with Ejiro tonight.
Mhm.
So we're looking at understanding, um, you know, promoting the well-being of children, and we are looking at what is child um, promoting the well-being of children, and we are looking at emotional abuse. So we are looking at emotional abuse. We would go straight in and we go to Ejiro. So when we talk about emotional abuse, because emotional
Yeah.
abuse is so important, the
Yeah.
very first session we had, we were talking about the categories of abuse when we talk about child abuse. We did mention physical abuse, we mentioned emotional abuse, we mentioned neglect, we mentioned sexual abuse. So last time we've done,
Mhm.
we talked about physical abuse, and so now we're going to talk about emotional abuse. So what do we mean by emotional abuse? What does it involve?
So
Edgeworth.
I think for me, I like to make things very, very simple. So as a professional, it's persistence. Persistent, I said persistent means ongoing exposure of a child to negative environment. So provided by the caregiver. So it could be the carer, it could be the mother, it could be the father, it could be even the environment where they are growing up in. So that persistent negative behavior could be shouting, could be, screaming, or mom and dad fighting, or the adult fighting, or even fighting in the community where you find yourself, or, things like a child being ignored or being said certain things, that are negative, like, you are not good, you're stupid, you're this, or anything that has emotion that a child is exposed to that has impact emotional in their emotional well-being, psychological well-being is classified consistently is classified as emotional abuse.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, within here, we realize that then the child, I mean, the things we do or the things we don't do, our actions and inactions, we are then
Yeah.
making the child to feel worthless. We are making the child to feel unloved. We are making the child to feel lonely, the child to feel
Mm-hmm.
scared. So
Mm-hmm.
all that comes into play to impact negatively on the child. Maltreating of emotional maltreatment of a child.
Of a child,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Wow. So we would go into further to talk about, the types of abuse. Just give examples. We want to just give some examples for us to know that this is what we mean by,
Emotional
this
abuse.
is what we mean
So,
by
for
emotional
example, if
abuse.
children who are exposed to consistent domestic violence, mom and dad fighting all the time, if or even a child who's been exposed to even war, in most developing country, a child who is exposed, ignored all the time, or even a baby, not who's crying, at not being picked up, not his needs are not being met. That itself is classified as emotional abuse. Exploiting the child, or verbally telling the child you're worthless, you're not good, or saying the things that will not, that affirm the child negatively, not positively. So you can give positive affirmation and you can give negative affirmation. So when you give a negative affirmation to a child consistently, that is an emotional abuse. Really. That's classified as one of the signs of, one of the things that happens, as classified as abusing a child emotionally, or then we can talk about, okay, you're telling the child, maybe the child come, last time we were talking about your child bring your result in and they had A, B, C, and you expected them to have all A stars, and you said, after all, your mates are having A stars. What is it? So instead of affirming that child positive, say, look, you've done your best, you're well done, that itself, clap. If you do it consistently, all the time, the child comes to you, say, look, I've achieved this, and you're not giving that child some, positive information, that could result to an emotional abuse. Or whatever the child does, even if maybe you ask the child, for example, to wash the dishes, and and the child washed, you obviously did what you asked them to do. However, you didn't say thank you because they didn't do it well. So definitely one time, second time, third time, every time you ask this child to complete a task and has not done it well, you pour abuses, you curse them, you say they are not good, it's not good enough, I will do it myself. You're actually, that affects that child self-esteem. Then it becomes an abuse, really, because it's consistent. A child to witness, for example, mom and dad, as I said before, consistent argument in the family home. People are abusing themselves. Then obviously the child becomes also a victim. Clubbing also is known as emotional abuse. Or we have, in most cases, we have what we call the second child syndrome. So you have the first and you have the third. So this middle child syndrome, the child feels neglected. They said, oh, the first one is mom and dad's favorite. The last one is, the two ones are mom's favorites. So where is this? So whatever the middle child does is never good enough. That itself is emotional abuse. You're ignoring that child. So that child, her needs, or his or her needs psychologically, is not being met by the caregiver.
Yes. Wow. Wow. And then, I mean, some of these things, sometimes, we do them, or, people do them without,
Yeah.
realizing the impact it's going to have on the child.
Absolutely.
Because,
Absolutely.
for instance, like you said, humiliating the child or constantly criticizing the child,
Yeah.
sometimes, and I know that sometimes a parent may be doing that because the parent has high expectations of, the child. The parents want the child to do well. The parents want the child to be the best. And sometimes,
Yeah.
you may have the best of intentions for that child, and that is why
Absolutely.
your intentions is not really like, may not deliberately to harm the child, but then you are not, realizing how your behavior, how your constant criticism of the child, how your constant, humiliating of that child, saying that you are no good. Look at how your other friends are doing. You can't, you are 8 years old, but you can't even, like, do this for yourself. Meanwhile, your other sibling can do it. So comparing that child to, the siblings, or to other friends, or to people in his or her age group, I mean, forgetting that, right? We all have different abilities, don't we?
Absolutely.
And every
Absolutely.
child is
Absolutely.
every child is unique. Every child is different. So you can't compare child A to child B. And yes, so but then unknowingly, we are then the child, these words then registers in the child's mind. The child is then thinking, oh, I am no good, I am really, really bad. Why is this? I mean, my mom is saying that my sister can do this and I'm not able to do it.
Absolutely.
Then
Yeah.
my mom may be right. There's something really wrong with me. I am really, like, really inadequate. And then at that point, the low self-esteem begins to set in. The low confidence begins to set in, and the child
Absolutely.
grows up,
Absolutely.
with esteem issues, because the child continues to think that, he is inadequate.
Absolutely.
And that's, and like we are saying, every child is recognizing the child's individuality. Every child is different. Every child is an individual, or in his or her own right. And then an
Absolutely.
individual with
Absolutely.
their own strength and their own limitations. And it's about how we
Absolutely.
support that child
Mm-hmm.
to and again, socially isolating the child.
Mm-hmm.
There can be a situation whereby the child, you go to a gathering, and then you are like, oh, you stay here, kind of, you're
Mm-hmm.
not fit to be with the other children. And
Yeah,
then the child feels
absolutely.
that
Absolutely.
why am I being treated differently? You know,
Absolutely.
um, and again, Ejiro, I mean, in our line of work, we've come across many cases of domestic abuse where,
Mm-hmm.
when we go to our conferences, the child is placed, at risk of emotional abuse. Somebody would ask that,
Mm-hmm.
what is the connection between domestic violence and emotional abuse? How would you say that? How would you,
So
highlight on that?
some of the impact of domestic violence is it actually results to children having very low self-esteem, having it can lead to aggressive behavior in children, and it can lead to bedwetting. It can lead to even poor relationship with their peers, lack of positive confidence. So I mean, so domestic has, research actually shows that domestic violence has a very negative impact in terms of children's either social and emotional development. So just so even in within research, it's saying that any child who is consistent, obviously exposed to mom and dad fighting, whether physically or even mentally or verbally, is classified that it has a devastating effect on child psychological development. So that child can grow up having low self-esteem. Child, seeking, like my colleague has rightly said, seeking inappropriate behavior, low self-esteem, aggressiveness towards others, being uncooperative, when in terms of boundaries setting, or even showing some that immature behavior. So you see maybe a 10-year-old behaving, if they're in a difference, they're behaving as if they're five-year-old because they're seeking attention. You say, and then their confidence is likely to be impacted. That sense of self as a human being is likely to be impacted. In fact, domestic violence is one of the things, even from babies. I always say to families, I say, go to the hospitals and look at babies where there is a pregnant woman who has experienced domestic violence. There's a serious psychological in terms of the brain development. You see, so that's why we advocate even domestic violence, whether verbal or physical, has devastating impact on the child's emotional and psychological development. And it will come out in poor behavior, it will come out in low self-esteem, it will come out in aggression, difficulty in forming attachment, building positive relationship with others. So those are the side effects and a serious sign of a child who is actually exposed to serious domestic violence or even trauma, like war or environment that is very, very negative, or even a child who is being made to watch, pornography, anything, sexual abuse, the child is watching. That itself is also emotional abuse. Watching, allowed to see mom and dad or friends or whatever being made to, to see the things they're not supposed to see at the appropriate age is classified as an abuse because it's going to have negative impact in terms of their overall development, especially in their emotional development, psychological development, as they grow up at every stage of their lives, basically. So, for example, a baby will continue, constantly cry and seeking and unable to form an attachment to the caregiver. Sometimes, some mothers will say, oh, my baby is rejecting me. Then you have to dig read deep. Why? Was pregnancy wanted? What was happening between, the partners, is this from, it could also could have been happening. So all those things, we have to, see that those are the side effects. Once it's picked up, we'll be able to do something about it. Yeah.
Wow. Wow, thank you, Ejiro. And then in terms of still on the, I mean, that is really comprehensive. Still on, domestic abuse. I have worked with families where And then I have interacted with people where they would say that, but then
Yeah.
when my partner and I were fighting or arguing, the child wasn't in the bedroom, or I mean, the child wasn't in the area. The child was in
Yeah.
in their bedroom. So if the child is in their bedroom and we are in the living area and we are arguing, and the child or we are fighting and we are smashing things, and I am hitting my partner, how is that
Yeah.
going to impact on the child who is in his bedroom or her bedroom?
So one right, I've had cases. I mean, this is experience, years of experience now, and you can look at, you can see the patterns. So we have a story of a child A whose mom and dad used to fight all the time, and I said, "How did it make you feel?" She said, "We used to hide under the bed. Every time they were arguing in their bedroom, we hid on our bed and we were scared. So every time, and they said they pretended to be asleep. You see, so they pretended to be asleep so that the mom and dad or mom or whoever is perpetrating or instigating this argument or the abuse, the domestic violence doesn't hear them. So the child, some of them are wet in the bed. Some of them, they said they're so scared, sometimes they freeze, and it sometimes gets to a point that even, yeah, the older, especially boys, they want to be involved, get in the middle of the arguments, and they're what we call hypervigilance. So most children who are, obviously who've got history, who are exposed to especially the issues of domestic violence within the family, they're very, very hypervigilant. They want to know what's going on all the time, because they don't trust the adults, their caregiver within the family home. So if, for example, if anytime mom and dad just raise their voice, they'll be wondering in their mind, what's going on now? What's happening? What's happening? You think they're not hearing, but they're saying to us, they're hypervigilance. They're hiding under the bed because they're scared, just to keep safe. They have a safety place where they feel that they're going to be under the bed or the back of the door. But you're thinking, oh, they're sleeping, but they're not. So even subconscious, as even babies can, innate, can, bring into their psychic the fight, the argument, the breaking of stuff that happens because you can just see that child start twitching, the baby start twitching, start constantly crying, unsettled, baby presenting very unhappy. So those things is something that we have to also look out for in relations to, when you say, I'm fighting. I mean, we have cases of, children were sleeping. Okay, if I ask the children outside the family home, they will tell me, no, we pretended that we were sleeping, but we were not sleeping, but we could hear everything that's been said, but we were scared, so that's why we didn't come out. And some of them end up wet in the bed, or their speech is delayed. So this is one thing you must always look out for, especially for children from 0 to 2. It's a significant part of their development in terms of brain. Every environment where there is history of domestic violence, watch that child. That child's speech is likely to be delayed and affects the way, obviously their cognitive development is actually impacted. Their verbal articulation is impacted. So, some people will complain, oh, my child is not talking at the age of 2, you're supposed to be talking. Be truthful with your health visitor or your GP or even your speech therapist, that this is exactly what's going on. Give them the full history so that they'll be able to give you the right support that is needed for your child to be able to communicate, at the time they're supposed to become that. That's at the age, and they're supposed to be communicating.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, so domestic abuse or domestic violence does have a big impact on, a child emotional well-being. And
Yeah.
therefore, we can't just assume that because, like Ejiro said, because you think the child is, in the bedroom and, they are on the bed and you think the child is sleeping, and then, like, the child is not sleeping. The child is pretending to be asleep. The child knows exactly what is happening at home, and the
Yeah.
child is so scared, and then I always tell people that, imagine being a child and, being knowing that your parents are arguing, they're fighting, there's so much chaos at home, maybe daddy is the perpetrator and daddy is hitting mom, and daddy is doing all kinds of things, and mommy is so scared
Yeah.
and daddy is, like, using things to hit mom. Assuming you are a child, right? You are in your bedroom. The fact that you don't, see these things it's even more worrying for you, because at least if you can see it, then you can
It's
know
worrying,
exactly what is
yeah.
happening. But then if you can't see it and you are in your
It's unsafe,
bedroom,
yeah.
you are then imagining the worst. When you hear mom shouting, you are thinking, is she
Absolutely.
okay? Why is she
Yeah,
shouting? And then when
absolutely. Absolutely.
when you hear something being smashed, you are like, has the TV been smashed? Is the TV working? Has dad smashed something? Has dad hit mom with something? So because you can't see it, you are imagining the worst, scenario that can happen. And then you are thinking, and then when you don't hear mom's voice, you are thinking, is she alive? Is she dead? So you are so scared because so
Exactly. Exactly.
not witnessing is even more scary for the child, because the child then has
Absolutely.
nightmares. The child
Absolutely.
then has, the child becomes really, really stressed. The child becomes really terrified. The child is wondering whether somebody is, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, if they need to be calling the police or the ambulance. And the child is wondering whether my pet is
Absolutely.
okay, whether my teddy bear has been
Mm-hmm.
smashed by daddy. So a lot of wild things
Absolutely.
then goes on in the mind of the child. And that is why
Yeah,
we keep saying that
absolutely.
even though the child is not witnessing the abuse, the emotional impact
Mm-hmm.
is so massive. And therefore, it's
Exactly.
important that we are mindful. And again, one thing I have also picked
Absolutely.
up with some families is the fact that, is the area of, not valuing the child, or not showing a lot of love to the child, and making the child feel
Absolutely.
worthless and unloved and all that.
What
So,
less? Yeah.
I keep, I keep saying that, we need to be praising the children a lot more. So we need to focus
Mm-hmm.
on the positives than focusing on the negatives. If a child
Absolutely.
goes to school and the child's come back home, right, and the child has got a certificate which shows that the child has got like 100% school attendance, what do we do when the child
Mm-hmm.
brings it to us? Do we just look at, so this child is saying, mommy, mommy, or daddy, daddy, look at what I've got. Okay, so you just get the paper or the whatever, the card, you look at, well done, 100%. What do you do? Do you just throw it away? Do you just put it somewhere because it means nothing
Exactly.
to you? But then if the
Exactly.
child had come
Exactly.
home with something concerning that this child had been fighting with somebody, you would then be angry. So why do we always try
Mm-hmm.
to focus on the negative? Why do we
Yeah.
react on the negative
Yeah.
things, but then
Yeah.
show no emotions at all? We do not react on the positives. That
And I
is why
think I
it's
think it comes.
important.
Yeah, I think it comes. I think it does come with exposure, and it comes with
Mm,
our own, the caregivers' own experiences,
mm,
and just learning. Sometimes I think it's just, hopefully we have to. We talked before that parenting is a live learning skill. It's a our or it's a project that you've been given by the creator to and you have to finish that project, and that project is a lifetime project. But from 0 to 18 years old, we as caregiver have a responsibility to continue to learn how to bring a balanced, emotionally, physically, and psychologically balanced children that will fit in for the next generations. So it's up to us to learn, okay, what do I have to do to build this young person's, this child's self-esteem? So okay, what does low self-esteem, or not, good self-esteem, what does good self-esteem look like? Let's look into what does good sense of self look like? What does confidence in ourselves, what does it look like? So as parents, we're going to encourage each other. Say, look, okay, I know, okay, this is the impact if I say this to this child, or I don't affirm the good stuff that this child doing. This is what is likely to impact this child long term. So I think most parents don't know that if I tell that child you're stupid all the time, that child will be stupid because they believe you. They believe you as an
mm.
adult, a caregiver, that if you say, because you are the book, we are the book that they're reading, isn't it? Adults are the book the next generation is reading. So if we say, oh, this is white, they're likely to believe you, especially as a caregiver, parent, or a guardian, But if you say this is pink, they're likely to believe you until they become adult and know that, oh, maybe you betray them. It was never pink. So it's up to us to say, okay, this thing that I'm doing, what impact does it have on the little people that I have influence on? It doesn't even have to be it could be your community where you work, or your church, wherever you are. That if I'm saying, okay, well done, you've done this really well, I think, you have done it and you've tried your best. And I'm sure you're going to, if you want to try better, you can always try better. So it's just learning that as adults, let's learn the skill to build our own personal sense of self, actually, so that to know that it doesn't benefit a child to be negative towards a child, because children are also human beings, aren't we? They're little people that we have to bring up for the next generation to be positive role model for their own generation, from the generation to generation. So for me, it's just today, the purpose of this platform is to build the adults so that they have a knowledge of being able to impact their own generation, to say, okay, next time after this streaming today, I'm going to learn something. When my child comes, if I ask my child to wash the dishes or clean the house or hoover the stairs, even if they don't invite properly, I'm just going to say, well done, thank you for actually, making the effort to hoover it. I know years ago when my kids, I sent them to clean their room, they just clean the room anyhow. But I never ever said you didn't do it very well. I would, maybe once a month, I would just take the hoover around and just clean it, because you're teaching them a skill. So know that, whatever behavior as adults that we do, know that somebody's copying you. So you have to think about yourselves. Okay, what skill do I want children to learn? So if your mom and dad are fighting, is that what you want your child to learn when they become adults? If you give your child, as a child, a negative affirmation, what do you think they're going to give their children? Because that's all they know. You see, so we're thinking as adults in our personal life, what is it positive we can put in our child? So we're teaching them now to become human beings, to be able to resolve conflict, not physically fighting, but resolve conflict by communicating with one another. Instead of being angry and either verbally angry or physically, being angry physically. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So positive reinforcement is really important.
Yeah.
We should concentrate on the positives. Praise. Children thrive on praise. They thrive on praise. And those seemingly insignificant achievements, it means a lot to them.
Absolutely.
So those things mean a lot to them. So we should focus on, well done. Oh, you are so good. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Oh, and then when we do that, we kind of set the bar and the expectation for the child. We know that the child knows that, okay, so if I do more of this, I'll be getting more praise from my parents or from my carers. And so the child will do more and more and more, because the children thrive on praise. Even as adults, we want to be praised for doing good job. I mean, when you go to the work and your manager tells you that, oh, Jiro, I like the report you've written. It's so incomprehensive. It's so clear, and the message is there. You feel proud as an adult. So how much more a child, right? I mean, and as I said before, so many times I have seen, children, I have seen children, particularly, showing that 100% attendance to the parent, and the parents was like, as if they didn't even know what that was about. They just looked at it and just. In fact, one parent even chucked it in the bin. So what message are you giving to the child? The child was like, "Oh, mommy, can you believe it? Oh, look at what I've got. Look at what I've got from school."
Yeah.
And then the parent looked at it. I'm not sure what they were expecting, but then they looked at it. It says that, "Well done." They just put it down. No, well done to the child. No, I'm really proud of you. Because when you say those things, and then in the morning when you are getting the child ready for school, the child wants to get 100% again, but the child will not give you a lot of stress. The child would, happily want to go and have the shower and get ready for school, because the child wants to get 100%. I know that my children, it can get to the stage that even when they are not well, they still want to go to school, because They want to get
Exactly.
100%.
Exactly.
They want to get a hundred
Absolutely.
percent, certificate.
Absolutely.
And even though there was one time
Absolutely.
my daughter was really poorly, and I was like, no, you have to be home. She was like, I'm not going to get 100%. I was like, the teacher will understand. Don't worry. Yeah,
Absolutely.
so that is
Yeah.
so important. We
Yeah.
need to be doing it. We need to be praising them. Praise that love. We need to keep praising them. And obviously we are not saying that when they do something which is not acceptable, when they display negative behaviors, we shouldn't talk about it. By all means, talk about it and let the child know that this is not right,
Absolutely.
this is not acceptable. But then what we are actually saying is that we need to emphasize more on the positive, more
On
on
the
the
positive.
positive,
Absolutely.
because
Yeah.
many times we tend to have a blind eye on the positives and then only
Mm-hmm.
react when the child does something really negative. But then that is
Absolutely.
not a good balance. Yeah. Sergio,
Mm-hmm.
and I know we've got 30 minutes more to go. We are halfway. Could we look at the possible signs of emotional abuse? If a parent should ask that, how do I know that my child is, suffering emotional abuse or at risk of emotional abuse?
Yeah.
How can I know the signs? What are some of the things that we can be able to share with the parent?
So some of the signs really, the child, as I think I've just mentioned, past, in short form before, that sometimes you see children who maybe are 10 or 11 years old behaving like 5 year olds. So immature behavior. Some of them are quite aggressive and they bully other children. So look at a child who is in the playground, tend to bully others. You'll be able to, and if you go back and restudy that child, you can tell there's something is going on in that child's life. It could be anything. It could be an abuse. It could be neglect. But it will be one form of abuse or the other. And sometimes a child, if it's quite severe and they're so traumatic, it can result to bedwetting, low sense of self, poor concentration in school. They present really unhappy. Lack of confidence, I said. And sometimes they're so fearful. That sometimes their speech can totter. They have delayed speech. Especially, I mean, I've had experience of a 11-year-old who really was wet in the bed at 11, not because of anything else. There was no medically, there was nothing wrong. They had gone to the doctors. As soon as dad left the family home, it started getting healed, really. Stop bedwetting, and unusual fear, inability to react to emotions, so the more, because already we talked before I think last 2 weeks, we talked about physical abuse, that when you keep, telling a child being exposed to a lot of negative environment, they become immune to it. They're not phased by it. I hear stories of a mom who's always angry, always fighting people on the street, and she had a baby on the pram. And one of the things that we picked up, that the baby was not phased. The baby didn't cry. You see, the adults fighting. She was just there, wasn't crying at all. So he was used to that kind of the adults in that environment, just fighting and quarreling, shouting. So that itself, that child is not going to learn in terms of emotional regulations. You see now. So that would be the part of So the child will have inability to be able to regulate their emotions. They develop at every stage. So those are some of the impacts of a child who, or the child feels as if there's nothing to live for. Nobody loves me. So the child is likely to feel unloved, especially if the child who's a middle child who feels that they're not being favored by the parents. They're not being given the attention. They're being ignored. Not given the time, the attention like their siblings does, and they feel a sense of worthlessness. What's the point of living the life? Because no matter what I do, it's not gonna nobody recognize it. So for me, those are the signs. So sometimes when they're quite
Yeah.
serious, post-traumatic, sleepless nights, they're unable to sleep, or they have tummy ache. See children all the time, they complain of tummy ache, they're not going to school, there's something wrong. They complain of, not being able to sleep, they have nightmares, as my, Essie Lovely has said. They have nightmares, they can't sleep, or they have tummy ache, they complain of tummy ache, they don't want to go to school, I don't want to go out, always, scared all the time. Sometimes babies will startle, you touch them, they startle, as if, especially, newborns, they startle as if, because something has happened within the environment in which they're being brought up in. Or sometimes, they can't control their bowels, so anything, so one we must always look out for those kind of changes, dramatic behavior changes. This child used to be happy. What happened? Are they withdrawn? They're not talking. They don't talk about home life. So in school, you see some children, they never talk about home life, because it's not that they don't have any, because they feel that they have nothing to say. And so those are the things we look at. So it might not be very, very obvious, but if it's quite significant, quite serious, is when you start seeing, bedwetting, quite seeing, verbal delay of a baby or a child, young child, or immature behavior, just seeking attention all the time. So they'll start behaving negatively in order for them to get that attention that they're not getting. Yeah. Or
Wow.
lack of confidence, very low confidence, or low sense of
Yeah.
self, of who they are as a child or as a young person.
Yeah. Yeah. So low, I mean, self-esteem and low self-image, and low
Yeah.
confidence. And then, I mean,
And then, yeah.
and then some of these possible signs, do kind of have like, it's not just like, a short term it kind of, sign or impact or wherever it
Absolutely.
goes, it has a long
Absolutely.
term thing. So the child would grow up into an adult and have, low self image, and yeah, they have low self image of themselves, and and that is quite, quite sad. And and then
Mm,
such adults would, would struggle to form, healthy relationships. And
absolutely. Absolutely.
they may, and then again, that can also, having, low self image can also increase your own vulnerability to, like, abuse. Because
Absolutely. Absolutely.
because you know the abuser would, because you would end up, because you don't value yourself. And that's when you are even being abused, you are kind of believing that you deserve that, you know yeah. Yeah. And then again,
Absolutely.
we've had
Absolutely.
issues around developmental delays, you know and so a child can be like, 8 years old, but would maybe functioning at the age of 5 years, you know and sometimes this can also be a part, or a contribute um factor to that. And again, Ejiro, I know you mentioned again behavior. So some children certainly can have um behavior issues, and some may be displaying aggressive behaviors, because the child has grown up, to seeing, for instance, in the case of domestic abuse, the child has witnessed or keeps witnessing abuse at home. Parents are fighting. There's always chaos at home. There is always aggression at home. And that misunderstandings are resolved through aggression and through fight and all that. So there's no proper
Absolutely.
communication at home. And the child picks up on these things. And the child then grows up to then, act aggressively. In school, the child is hitting and beating other children. You know, the child
Yeah.
becomes a bully.
Absolutely.
And then the child grows up and then, becomes aggressive, and be indulging in inappropriate behaviors, be indulging in criminal activities. The child may be in trouble with the police all the time. um you know the child may truant may child may have negative friendship, associate with people who are
Absolutely.
risky
Yeah.
people. And the child would have issues with the police, issues with the law, because of engaging in criminal activities as a result of their aggressive behaviors. um and again, we have issues around self-harming. So definitely, that can also contribute to, so that can be a sign, also a sign of emotional abuse. The child is self-harming, and then again suicidal thoughts, and again drug and alcohol. So we want to go into we want to, like, be looking, as we bring in this one, and we want to be looking more into the impact of emotional abuse. And I know that some of the things we've talked about would come into the impact of emotional abuse. So, I mean, Ejiro, could you pick the conversation up for us, please? The impacts of emotional abuse on children. Okay, you can't hear Ejiro. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, I've just mute my. I'll just unmute my thing. So some of it, I mean, I've seen teenagers running away from home, you know, and associating with, gang county line, results to, drugs, cannabis use, alcohol, in order to numb some of those pain that they've never spoken to anyone about. Which is really, our heart's cry for, especially our community, our Black community, the young boys who have joined gangs. If you read the newspaper in London, in the United Kingdom, 85% of children who are in prison are Black boys. 85 of them, most of them, if you look at those who were killed by gang members, 85 were Black boys as well. What is happening within our family home? What is going on? What are they being exposed to? So those are some of the serious impacts they will have on a child, that's been exposed to emotional abuse and any kind of abuse within the family or within that community. So what we say impact means that when they grow up, they're likely to repeat the same pattern. So we want to try and see what we can do to try and break those patterns. Because when a child is exposed to, mom and dad, this is the only way they know they're fighting. That's how to resolve conflict. That's exactly what they're going to learn. So that's, is already impacted on them. So we say impact, we're talking about, a child wetting the bed at the age they're not supposed to be wetting the bed, or they've sought, the parents or the adults have sought a medical support, but that is being, ruled out, that it's got nothing, it's not medical reasons why a child will keep wetting the bed. 15-year-old wetting the bed, that itself is obviously, because they've been exposed to all sorts of abuse, especially emotional abuse, as we're talking about. That itself becomes a negative impact in relations to that child. So inability to actually to build a relationship, positive relationship, and then, as Elsa has rightly said, as the child develop at every stage of their life, if they don't build that positive relationship, they cannot function within society. So, if whatever they learn from the adults or their guardian or their caregiver, that's what they will bring on to the next relationship, if it's girlfriend, boyfriend, or husband and wife, whatever, even a relationship with their peers. You see, instead of, talking properly with their friend, relating well, or resolving conflicts properly, especially, the struggle to resolve conflict. It leads to fight, aggression, verbally and sometimes physically, or sometimes the children, the impact could be, they want to be another child, or they're unable to actually concentrate in class. They're not able to, concentrate in class because their mind is somewhere, because they haven't had a good experience at home, or even sometimes they fall asleep in class, not able to achieve, academically, or socially, at all, within, their stage, at every stage of their, stage of, if it's a 10-year-old, why they not achieving? If it's a 20, 19, 18, 6, 17-year-old, why are they not meeting their level of achievement? So those are the things that serious impact in terms of, our children, and you see girls, who beautiful, they've got everything physically going for them, but because of their past, experience growing up, they'll go out and choose the men who will lead to them
Yeah.
be abused all over, as you rightly say, abused all over again. I always say this: so some of us, especially in Africa, wherever you are in the world, some of people have been really exposed to people telling them you're not going to achieve anything, you don't know nothing, you're not going to achieve achieve, and then you carry that itself as an abuse for the rest of your life. So whatever achievements you've got, you said, no, I'm no good. Or someone tried to love you, said, no, I don't deserve to be loved. Hold on a minute. So you've internalized that word. Said, I don't deserve to be loved. So what happens subconsciously? You break every positive relationship, whether boyfriend, whether man or woman or father or mother, or even placement, even foster carer. That relationship is broken because that child is saying, I don't deserve to be loved. I don't deserve to be loved. You see, so subconsciously, you sabotage that relationship without knowing consciously that that's what's happening. So we have to really go down deep and really self-reflect that some of those impacts that it goes to generation if they're not broken or something is not done, and say, you know what, was my experience. I don't want my children or the children or the people I'm caring for to have the same kind of experience. How do I break it? How do I change this pattern? How do I not accept when somebody take away my money and or say, let's open an account and don't allow me to give me money? So look, I gave you £20 last week. Why are you asking me for another £20? I can't give you that. You're a spendthrift, or wherever you are, as an adult, they say, where are you? Where are you going? The child is watching that, seeing that mom or your dad is being controlled, or wherever, so those are the things the child's going to pick up and learn from them. And from generation, we say, okay, this is a pattern of behavior. So if somebody swears at you, you don't have to, you can accept it. Or if somebody says you're no good, you can accept it. If somebody says you can't go out, you're not allowed to see your friends, you're not allowed to go anywhere. You're not allowed to watch TV. You're not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do that. So what am I allowed to do? What am I allowed to do? So that is the impact. So for you, the child is not even exposed to the world, learn and make mistake, and so they grow at every stage of their development, basically,
Wow. Thank you, Ejiro. So there's a question over here saying that
Yeah.
there are kids who are supplied all their needs at home and yet go to school to steal, sometimes money. What leads to this behavior? What are your
So
thoughts
there are
on that?
kids who are supply all their needs at home and yet go to school to steal, sometimes money. What leads to this? Okay. What are they supplied at home? What is it? Is it material things they're supplied at home? Or they're given the love and attention that they need? I can tell you, you know why people steal? Is for attention. Most children who steal, they're stealing for attention. For somebody to, is a cry inside to say, something's happening in my world, but I cannot say. I can bet you that. So if a child is I would ask, is the child, if the child is given all their physical needs are met, what is happening to their emotional needs? Are they being given attention? What is actually going on in the child's life? And it can be deeper. And sometimes we might never be able to find out because it's so deep that child might not even be able to verbally explain it. So for me, I have a sense that that child is actually seeking attention within, if that child is doing that. If I were within that school environment, I would sit down with that child and I said, tell me a bit about what's going, tell me about yourself. What's up, And so that child probably needs to be spoken to. I mean, obviously, we must not look at the immediate behavior that child's exhibited, but then look behind what is going on in that child's life. I can bet you, if we go back, there's something going on. It might not be that deep, but there's something exactly that's going on. And most children anyone who steals, there's an attention. Either that child, I mean, we had cases of children who were removed from one environment, placed in another environment. They wake up 1 o'clock in the morning to go and steal food, even though in that foster placement they've got everything, but they go and steal food because their environment where they're coming from, food was deprived of them. You see now, so this signs really, it's just saying there's something that child is seeking. He's seeking attention. It's just going back and looking at the backstory of that child and find out why. If that child is provided with all the physical needs, you hear stories of children who were adopted at the age of 2 in a wonderful family home, mom and dad, they live in a 5-bedroom house, gone to a private school, and all of a sudden, this behavior comes up. What do? Let's go back to the history of when that child was conceived. Where was the parents doing? What was happening? So these things are really, really deep. as a human being, that most Black community are not cognizant. Look, really, we have to really self-reflect. Prayer alone doesn't do it. That is the truth. Many of us are not, we have to be truthful with ourselves. What were we exposed to? That's why even though we become Christians, a lot of people still shout at their children. A lot of people still, there's still domestic violence within the family home. They're still exposed to that. So it's just a let's self-reflect. What exactly? So it's just getting the balance. So for me, the answer to this question is let's look at the backstory. Let's look at the backstory. What's actually happening in the back
Yeah,
previously
yeah. So
within
let
that
us,
family setting.
let us look at the backstory. Let us look at the background. Let us look at the history.
Uh-huh.
What has gone on in the
Exactly.
child's early years, when the child
Early
was,
years.
growing up. Because certainly the
Mm-hmm.
child's experiences, during those early years, that is,
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
certainly does have an impact on the child's, and
Absolutely.
behavior, on the child behavior. There
Mm-hmm.
is, a cause
Mm-hmm.
and effect. And then like you said, Adriel, even though the child currently, will be in a place whereby all the needs are being met, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean that would then make you to wonder why the child should still be doing the very things that you as the parent or the carer dislike, because the child is being given everything.
Exactly.
But then, when we don't go
Exactly.
back to understand the child's upbringing, the child's history, the
Exactly.
child's formative years,
Exactly.
we will not be able to get
Exactly.
answers to these things. So it's important that we
Absolutely.
understand these things, this background, to get to know the child
Exactly. Exactly.
even better. So whilst we are still getting to,
Exactly.
thank you for your comments. And Risa is saying that positive reinforcement shapes a child's behavior. That is certainly true.
Absolutely.
Sharon, Lucy,
Mm-hmm.
thanks for the comment. Yeah, so whilst we bringing this to a close, we'll be looking at, again, we touched on, mental health, and how
Mm-hmm. Mental health.
mental
Yeah.
health disorders, and how emotional abuse can also lead to mental health disorders, such
Mm-hmm.
as anxiety,
Absolutely.
depression, and the
Mm-hmm.
phobias. And therefore, we need to also be
Exactly.
mindful of that. And again, we talked about aggressive behaviors, antisocial behaviors. A lot of children, grow up to, as they grow up, they witness so much violence at home, so much aggression at
Yeah.
home. Problems are
Mm-hmm.
not solved, in a healthy manner. All they learn is aggression. And therefore, they grow up to be really aggressive people. They get in trouble with the police. They get in trouble with
Mm-hmm.
authorities, and they are in and out of prison. And they do a lot of work with probation. And again, still within that, we have some children also, engaging in drugs and alcohol, you know, drugs and alcohol, because they then associate with risky, I mean, other young people who are risky, who display negative behaviors, who have had difficult upbringings like them, and and again they learn these habits from them. So they learn to use drugs, cannabis, heroin, crack cocaine, and all that. They learn to use alcohol, and therefore they end up using drugs and alcohol. And so these are, for me, these are really, really important things that we need to be mindful of. We need to be really mindful of. And again, as we said before, we're talking about self-harm. And I have seen a lot of young people who have self-harm because of, I mean, when a child self-harms, I know that some people would say that, oh, the child is just seeking attention. That is why they are self-harming. A child wouldn't just get up one day. A child with such a lovely, a good attachment, good bonding, a nurturing home environment, and everything is being supplied for the child, will not just get up one day and say that, oh, I'm fed up, let me just self-harm. No, there's always a reason behind that. And if the child is seeking attention, why would the child be seeking attention? Is it because the child is not getting the attention and the love at home? So, just putting it blankly that, the child is just doing this just to seek attention. So there is nothing to it. There is something to it, and we need to look into it. If a child is self-harming, it is serious. And we need to look into it. We need to understand why the child is self-harming. sometimes, parents, the house is just too unbearable for the child. And again, when you tell the child that you are worthless, you are unloved, nobody loves you because you are not beautiful, or you're not hardworking, or you don't do well in your exams, you are not a clever child. When you give the child all these negative behaviors, these negative messages, the child then think that, oh, I am really no good, nobody really wants me around them. Why was I even born in the first place? Some children would even want to take their own lives. Some would want to commit suicide because of the negative messages they have been given by people. And again, I keep saying that, as adults, yeah, as adults, as parents, and as adults, teachers and all that, parents, a child sees the parent as their primary role model, because the child comes into this world by these parents. So these people are really significant people to the child. The child sees the parents as people, the child holds parents in such high esteem. And because of that, because the child holds you in high esteem, the child trusts you and all that. Whatever you tell the child tends to believe it. So if you tell a child that you are unloved, you are very ugly, you are worthless, the child actually believes it, you know. And that is why I keep saying that we need to be mindful of the things we say. The things we say. We are the parents. We are the adult. The child is looking up to us. We are the child's first role models. If you are a parent, say you are your child's first role model, the child looks up to you. You are the child's role model. The child wants to be like you. And because the child wants to be like you, the child trusts everything you tell him or her. And that is why it's important that, you keep bringing the child up in love. There should be so much love at home. We're always talking about that a child should grow up in a stable home environment, in a safe home environment, in a nurturing home environment. What do we mean by a nurturing home environment? A home environment which is full of love, lots of love, which is peaceful, no chaos. It is really, really peaceful. Disagreement between adults, between parents, are resolved, away from the children, so they don't even see it. Every child should grow up in a nurturing home environment, and that impacts on the child's well-being, and that, in terms of the child, and that also goes through to follow the child to adulthood. If we want to have responsible adults, then we need to start doing our homework well. Responsible adults. Yes, and again, as
Absolutely.
as Ejiro also said, we have had work with children whereby, there's so much chaos at home, there is domestic abuse at home. They go to school, and because they have not been sleeping, at 10 o'clock to 11 o'clock, 12 midnight, parents are arguing, adults are arguing. And because of that, the child has not been able to have a good sleep. The child goes to school and the child is sleeping. The child is so tired, the child is sleeping. The child cannot even concentrate in school. The child then will not be able to do very well in school. The child comes home because the child hasn't been able to do well. You, the parents, you are then mad at the child that why didn't you get a good grade in maths? Why didn't you do very well in your science? Why didn't you do really well in, what has been happening to you? Forgetting that there's a connection in the child's behavior and, the child's behavior and, in school, and the child's result in school, and and then what is happening at home. There's that connection, but then we are not able to bring that connection together. We try to isolate the two. We can't do that, really. And again, we are talking about that thing of regulating your emotions. Ejiro, in our line of work, we have come across, children and adults who are not able to regulate their emotions. They are not able to resolve issues, in kind of a sensible way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
They get really mad at everything. They are always angry, anger. And when they are angry, in cases of domestic abuse, because they are angry, they are easily, and then they are not able to regulate their emotions. Then they'll start throwing things, they start hitting people because they don't agree with you. Instead of understanding that if you don't agree with somebody, you have to listen to the person's point of view, bring your point of view on the table, and you two should, trash things out. But then the person has not been taught the strategies, because the person has witnessed his or her parent, using aggression at home while they were growing up. So this person then picks up on this behavior, thinking that's okay. So if somebody doesn't agree with you, the way to resolve this is to be aggressive, to hit the person, to throw things at the person, to hurt the person, instead of resolving it in a healthy way. So the person is then not able to regulate their own emotions. And then yes, and then this then becomes a concern as an adult, because you end up having issues with the police as well. You end up having issues with the police as well. Yeah, so we have talked a lot this evening, UK time this evening, and we've touched on emotional abuse many times, because emotional abuse, emotional abuse is more of it like internal, and it's not like physical abuse where you can see sometimes cuts and all that on the person and bruises and all that. Sometimes many people tend to minimize or not see the seriousness of emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is equally very damaging.
Absolutely.
It has short-term and long-term impact on the child. Many children have grown up into adults who are damaged adults, because they're emotionally damaged because of what had happened to them in their childhood. A number of adults are suffering from mental health disorders as a result of what has happened or what had gone on in their formative years. That is why it's important that we take emotional abuse also very important, and then make sure that children grow up in a safe, stable, nurturing home environment. Obviously, parenting, like I always say, parenting is not it's not easy peasy. We always learn. Even as professionals, we learn every day. We learn from the child themselves. We learn from professionals. We learn from books. We learn from other parents. We always learn. Parenting is a journey that you would never be an expert, sort of. I mean, you can be an expert to a certain degree, but then you can't know it all. And therefore, we always learn. Let us be more patient with our children, because they're also going through their own challenges, and have so much love at home. Ejire, what's your final word?
So my final
Ejire.
word, how do we survive? How do you build? Yeah. So sorry, can you hear me?
Oh yes, we can hear you. Ejire, I mean, we've got this quick question. It says
Okay.
that how do we
Sorry. So
reverse the
yeah,
behavior and attitude of children who have been emotionally abused for a long time? How
attitude.
do we do that? Yeah.
Okay, that's a good one actually. That's also, so they have to be in a. For me, it's just build. It's just what are the has the parents learned? Has the caregiver learned another way of um, building the self-esteem? So, for example, I had cases of a 16-year-olds, when they were young, they had difficulty in relationship with their parents. But as they become 16, growing, become more mature, they had to apologize to the child and say, you know what, this, I used to tell you off, or I used to swear at you when you were at this age, but I've learned something differently. So I'm, from now I'm going to, we're going to talk, try and resolve the issue, whatever it is. I don't have to shout at you. We can talk about it on a one-to-one instead of shouting at each other. So for you is how you reverse this is it depends on
Mm.
the age of that child as well. At what age did the damage come through? And we, as so if it's like young age, if it's a teen, depends on the age of that. If it's like, for example, if they were not available for a baby who would just be born between 0 and 2, you were never emotionally available because of mental health. So that child was not able to develop attachment. How do you change that? How you change it is okay from 2 to 9, from 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's still opportunity. So it depends on the stage of that child. If it's for a 5-year-old to 10-year-old, you can begin to say, okay, bring him in a stable environment. Is it mom and dad? Is it a positive caregiver? If it's a mental health person, that person address their adult's mental health, so that there's one positive adult in that child's life. Let that child have a positive adult process. You see, so for example, in our community, if a woman is suffering, single suffering from, so it's never around. Is there anybody else within the community who can be a positive role model for that child? That's what we need to look at. So if there's someone there within the community who's a positive role model, that person can begin to befriend and bring positive information for that child and can turn things around for that child. You say, now I'm in the church community, and I've worked, have a privilege to be involved with some of the young people. And I said, okay, don't worry, this is what your mom and dad are doing. This is what I think needs to happen. You see that? So I made myself available for that child. That child, said, I need to do this. This is all the activity I needed to do, but my parents, are not available. But I said, okay, within the community, I'm going to make sure I become one of yours, and I'm going to be available for you. So a child who's been ignored, this is how you treat it. Yeah, so it depends on every child, every stage of every child. So it depends on you can have the age, and maybe question and answer next time. You can have the age of a child, we can say, okay, at this age, this is what you do. So it depends on in the circumstances as well. So mom and dad, a child who already been, exposed, and the child's already developed, the stress, keeping safe. How will that child keep safe in the family home? He's been exposed to shouting all the time. Where is the safety? Is there a room in that house where the child can keep safe? Who can the child talk to in school? Who can the child talk to even outside? If they don't want to talk to somebody in school, within extended family member, they can talk to, they can relate to. That is the only way that child can say, I'm still worth something. Or either help mother, they bring the result, or tell them what to do all the time. Like the mom and I actually ignore it. Who is it an auntie? Is it an uncle that believes in them? You see the difference now. Psychology actually says you only just need one person who's a positive role model. In social work, we said, even if you don't have a positive role model within your community, if you don't, you have to have it somewhere. If you don't have it in your family home, you need to have it in the community. If you have it in the community, you have to have it in school. There has to be somebody that believes in that person. So like our young children, our young men who are really suffering, what are we doing as our male adults? Are they mentoring the young generation of males, to say, okay, everything has been fagged up for you. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to be there for you. Visit you. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to say you can talk to me. I believe that you can do this. You see, so we need the role model to turn things around children, even though if the adults can't do it. That's why we're doing this program. Let's talk about, okay, I can't do it. Hopefully we'll be able to put the telephone number out there. So I'm struggling here. I'm suffering from emotional, myself, mental health. I'm going through domestic violence between my mom and my husband. I can't really say anything about whatever I put in place. Everybody, there's inconsistent parenting here. For my daughter or my son, let's identify somebody in the community who can be a positive role model for one child. We do one
Thank you.
child at a time. Hopefully we'll be able to change something.
Thank you,
So I hope
Ejiro.
yeah.
Thank you,
Okay.
Ejiro. Yes, positive role model is very important. Somebody the child can look up to, somebody the young person can look up to. And again, in terms of parent, if you feel that you would benefit from some parenting strategies, by all means, please seek support around that. We've got parenting and support around parenting where you'll be taught or given certain strategies to help with your parenting. And again, look at what support you can also get from your child's school or your child's college. They may also be able to offer some support. I mean, seek all the support you can get. Ask relevant people, relevant agencies. Seek all the support you can get. Know that you are not in this alone. All too soon we're bringing this to an end. And we will be back again in a couple of weeks to still continue on our subject on the topic of child abuse. So for now, Ejiro, thank you so much for coming on. And for our viewers, thank you for watching and participating. Thank you for the
Thank
contribution,
you.
the question. So, yeah, so bye-bye, everyone, and take
Thank
care.
you.